Welcome back to the briefing this Friday afternoon. Well, first of all, Britain needs to find its feet with its new sovereign status. That's the view of the Conservative MP John Penrose, who has published a report of unfinished reforms that could put the country back on track and become more internationally competitive. I'm delighted to say John joins me in the studio today. John,
Arlene.
This is a follow-up report, isn't it? Because you, first of all, did a report back in September of 2020 looking at how we could be globally competitive after Brexit. But things haven't gone as well as you'd hoped.
Well, you're right, it's a follow-up report, and the good news is that the first report was actually commissioned by Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor. So I'm rather hoping that now he's back as Prime Minister, he's in a great place to sort of drive the pace forward, because you're right, what's happened is quite a lot of stuff's happened, to be fair. About half of the original report's recommendations have either happened or been promised, but that still leaves the other half, and some of those are the most valuable. They're also politically, quite a lot of them, the most difficult. It involves taking on some vested interests. But the advantage of economic reforms of this kind is it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything at all, really. It's all about just unblocking the arteries of our economy and getting everything to move faster.
And of course, that's what Brexit was about for a lot of us, to try and be more competitive in a global environment. And one of those issues is around energy. John, tell us about that.
Well, so everyone watching your show will know that their energy bills have gone through the roof.
Sure.
A lot of that has got nothing to do with what we're doing here. It's all to do with Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine and those sorts of things. But there is still quite a lot we could be doing here, which would mean that even after you've allowed for skyrocketing international prices, our prices still could be lower relative to those international prices if we did some of these reforms. So there's an energy bill just about to sort of get cracking in Parliament. If we do some reforms to the way our economy works, our energy sector works, particularly to say, why is it that your and my bill goes up with the price of gas, but actually increasingly a big chunk of our energy comes from renewables, from wind and solar, and the price of those has been falling for years. Why isn't that showing up in our bills? Those are the kind of reforms which could make a big difference to everybody.
And of course, energy security has become the key issue over this whole Ukraine invasion, and the fact that we really didn't have energy security, and all of a sudden nuclear is coming back in again, and onshore wind, and I know that's something that you feel quite passionately about.
Well, I think onshore wind is at least an option which people should be given.
It's part of the solution, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it's important if local communities agree. And it's really important that we don't try and dictate from London or from Holyrood or from Cardiff or Stormont either. It should be up to local communities to decide, but they should have the option. Now, plenty of them will decide they don't want to have local wind farms, and that's their call. It's their decision. But I think that people should at least be given the chance to make up their own minds.
And the reason why they may want to have these wind farms close by, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't like wind farms because they're a blight on the landscape and what have you, is because there's a lot of community funding goes into communities as a result of wind farms locally. I know that from Northern Ireland, for example, where there has been wind farms that have made a real difference.
Yes, and in fact, I'd like us to go further than that and say, you should be able, I would argue, to let somebody make an offer to local residents, say, we'll give you a discount on your energy bill.
Yes, sort of a district heating bill.
Exactly. So you get cheaper power if you have the wind farm. Now, again, some communities will say, no thanks, we don't want that. That's fine, that's democracy. But some might say, actually, do you know what? That's quite an interesting, give me 20% off my sky-high electricity bill. I might think about it. And again, it should be up to the local community, collectively, to meet and decide and agree.
And of course, it's very topical at the moment with our sky-high bills as well. Of course, we're in the season of yet another by-election, John. I think it's the fifth this year up in Chester City. Were you surprised that Labour held on in the fashion that they did?
Not really. I think it was a Labour-held seat before. It's a Labour-held seat now, and in the middle of an opposition held by-election, you'd expect them to win. What I was interested to see, though, was that while the Labour Party did well, actually Rishi, after about, 32 days since he became Prime Minister, something like that, our poll ratings have probably gone up a bit from the low point, but they've still got a long way to go. But as a starting point, I'd say, all right, well, this is early days, but at least the direction is in the right way. We'll have to see what happens over the course of the next month or two as well. But I'd rather it was going up than down.
Well, is that the case? Because that autumn statement didn't go down particularly well with some of your voters, I would argue. I mean, do you think that people will give them a chance in 6 months, a year, if things are moving in the right direction?
I think that, the evidence on the basis of 1 month so far with Chester, and I know it's a by-election and therefore you shouldn't read too much into those and all that sort of thing, is that it's a bit better than it was 6 weeks, 2 months ago, so that's a great start. But you're right, it is only a start. And I think that what people wanted to see from the autumn statement, first and foremost, there's lots of other things people want, but first and foremost, people just wanted to see stability and a return to being boringly, predictably normal. And I think that is what actually has happened. Now, that doesn't mean to say that that's all that's needed, and that's why I'm talking about these reforms in my report. We now need to go further. We need to start doing these reforms to unblock those arteries, get the economy moving faster, get back to growth, because that is something which I hope everyone agrees on.
Well, you see, that's a very interesting point, and I was going to say that to you, because your report is focusing on getting rid of regulations that have held us back and to look for growth in an innovative way. But yet, when the previous Prime Minister, Liz Truss, was focused very much on growth, the markets reacted very badly to that. How do you think that you can push ahead with the growth agenda, given what has happened in the autumn statement?
Well, because the proposals I'm making, as I said at the start, they don't cost the taxpayer anything, and they don't require Jeremy Hunt or any other Chancellor ever to borrow more money. So they have the advantage of being really cheap, but very, very helpful
to our... Give us an example of what you're talking about, John.
So, for example, at the moment, we talk about trying to get rid of the costs of red tape. That's a millstone which every company... every company has to carry around, strapped around its neck, dealing with form filling and all the like. Now, if you could just reduce that by 5%, 10%, or even just 1% a year, but keep doing it every year, then just think of the effect on the economy as a whole. Just think of the effect on the speed of movement. And at the moment, all economies, ours included, are digitising. That means that everything's moving faster. You need to be able to keep up.
As long as the technology works. Let me say that, John. No, look, I'm fascinated, and I hope we'll discuss this again. But before I let you go, there was big news today in the Westminster Village, and I would argue right across the country, when we heard that one of the big beasts of the Conservative Party, Sajid Javid, is not running in the next election. What's your reaction to that? I'm
very sad to see him go. He's a proper class act and a great guy. I don't think we should be too surprised that there are some people standing down now. In a party of 350-something MPs, Conservative MPs, you'd expect to see in a normal run up to any normal election, you'd expect to see somewhere around about 40 or 50 people standing down. So I suppose
what the public may not know is that each party says to their candidates and their sitting MPs, are you standing at the next election? And if you're not, we need to know. And we need to know by a deadline. And I suppose what people don't realise is that deadline is roundabout now, so people are taking decisions.
Exactly right, and actually there's been not that many compared to, I would expect there to be plenty more people standing down. Just in any normal election cycle, you'd expect 10-15% of the party just to decide that they've got other things they want to do with their lives, so there'll be more as well. But Sajid is a class act. Sorry to see him go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have worked with Sajid on many occasions, and I wish him well for the future. And John, thanks so much for coming into the studio.
Arlene.
That's John Penrose, the MP for Weston-super-Mare.